there, Senator Sullivan.
Hey, absolutely. Thank you guys. I'm so excited about the Alaska Manufacturing Association. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really great. Good.
Okay,
Good.
see, you're recording?
Yeah.
Great. I'm going to get started. I have a little intro here and let
Oh,
everybody know what's
good.
going on.
Great.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Working Families Tax Cuts Act Manufacturing Roundtable. My name is Megan Melatello, and I'm the Executive Director of the Alaska Manufacturing Association. Today is about clarity, connection, and meaningful dialogue around how federal policy intersects with Alaska's manufacturing landscape. Our goal today is simple: to create a space for Alaska's manufacturers to better understand how the WFTCA may impact your businesses and opportunities for growth. This isn't a political arena, this is a learning environment, a chance to gain context, ask good questions, and hear directly from Senator Sullivan. Thank you again for making the time to be here. So, for those of you who may be new to us, AKMA exists to strengthen the ecosystem for Alaska's manufacturers, from our smallest makers to our largest production facilities. We connect, advocate, and build the network that keeps manufacturing in Alaska moving forward. We help remove barriers, streamline support, and amplify your voices at the state and federal level. Our mission is to champion Alaska's manufacturers by expanding opportunities, improving infrastructure, and fostering a resilient local supply chain. We focus heavily on the issues that our members tell us that matter most: infrastructure, workforce, regulatory clarity, innovation, and domestic production. Everything that we do is oriented around making Alaska a place where manufacturing can thrive. Thought I put that on Do Not Disturb. Federal policy has real implications on the ground here in Alaska. The WFTCA includes provisions related to tax incentives, research and development, depreciation, and domestic production, all of which could influence how our manufacturers grow or invest over the next several years. We live in a unique state. Freight, energy, distance, and infrastructure challenges make our reality very different from manufacturing in the lower 48. So today is about understanding where this bill intersects with that reality. And before we move forward, I want to set the tone for today. This is not a space to air political frustrations or partisan issues. Our focus is professional, respectful, and specific. How does this legislation impact manufacturers, supply chains, and opportunities here in Alaska? We encourage curiosity, open dialogue, and respectful participation. So we're incredibly fortunate to have Senator Sullivan with us today. His committees, Commerce, Armed Forces, Armed Services, Environmental and Public Works, the Veteran Affairs, and they all intersect directly with issues affecting Alaska's manufacturing sector, from infrastructure to innovation to energy. Having him share his expertise gives our manufacturers a rare opportunity to understand federal policy at a deeper, practical level. And so before I hand things over, I want to share a brief introduction. Senator Dan Sullivan has spent decades serving Alaska through public service, law, national security, and economic leadership. He has served as Alaska's Attorney General, Commissioner of Natural Resources, and in multiple federal roles, including Assistant Secretary of State for Economic, Energy, and Business under Secretary Condoleezza Rice. He recently retired as a colonel after 30 years in the Marine Corps, with multiple deployments and leadership roles across active duty and reserve service. In the Senate, he serves on key committees that directly impact manufacturing, infrastructure, energy, and Alaska's economic resilience. We are honored to have him here today to walk us through key elements of the Working Families Tax Cut Act and what it means for our manufacturing sector. Please join me in welcoming Senator Dan Sullivan.
Okay. Wow, Megan, thank you for that very nice introduction. And to you and Lacey and the whole team at the Alaska Manufacturing Association, we really, really appreciate all the great work that you are doing. We're going to pull up a PowerPoint presentation. There it is. Hopefully you guys can all see it. And we're going to walk through that. First of all, like I said, congrats on standing up the Alaska Manufacturing Association. Hopefully you're going to see in this presentation, this bill is all about jobs. It's all about the economy. And as I've been saying, and most of my Senate colleagues don't even challenge me on it, there is no state that did better than the great state of Alaska in this big, what we call the budget reconciliation bill. By the way, Megan and Lacey, I want to thank you guys for your military service as well. We are really looking forward to working with the Alaska Manufacturers Association because I think this legislation can really kind of take us to a new level in terms of opportunities for growing our economy, growing our jobs, better wages, but really, really importantly, manufacturing. So what I wanted to do, I've been doing these presentations all over the state. This bill passed in July, and what I've been trying to do is get the word out through letters, through uh, constituent letters, to presentations when I'm home. I've probably given this PowerPoint, a version of this, probably 50, 60 times to so many different groups, but it's all the same. It's about, hey, here's what's in the bill. You may have seen some ads on TV and stuff saying some things about it. This is about setting the record straight. And then how can we work together to really seize the opportunities of what I believe is probably going to go down in history as one of our most important pieces of legislation for Alaska. Now, what do I mean by that? I think when you take a look, and I'm going to walk through it, and I'm going to try and emphasize some of the things that I think are going to be really important for our manufacturers. And by the way, to all the manufacturers who are part of your group who are on this PowerPoint, thank you, thank you, thank you. I know how hard you work. You guys are the people who employ Alaskans, who take risks, who work, way more than 40 hours a week. So thank you for that. My team's on this. Margaret Sharp, some of you know, she does all my regional work out in the Matsu Valley. She's on this PowerPoint right now. But as hopefully you're going to see, if this bill were 10 different bills, each of them would be a big deal for Alaska in different sectors of our economy, different sectors of areas that matter to Alaska. The fact that this bill is one big bill, what the president called one big beautiful bill. I actually like the Working Families Tax Cuts Act because that's what it does. But what I really call this bill is the Alaska Opportunity Act. And hopefully, once I get through this PowerPoint presentation and you guys ask questions, you're going to see the same thing like, whoa, this bill is a great opportunity for all of us. And I would say manufacturers in particular. So it's exciting. This is all about the Alaska comeback. And I'll start with a little bit of context because I think it's important when you talk about some of the things going on here in DC. Now, I've shown this handout, and I don't know if Margaret was able to get this to some of you guys, Megan and Lacey, but this was a handout that I had been showing for the last 4 years. This is what we call the last frontier lockup. It wasn't a great thing for us. This was the 70 executive orders and executive actions from the previous administration that were really locking up our land, shutting down economic opportunity. 70 exclusively, singularly focused on Alaska. Not good. So that was the last 4 years. On day one of the Trump administration, they issued this. And if you guys haven't gotten this, we will make sure Margaret and my team get this to you. This was one of the first executive order President Trump issued. There's his signature. It's actually called Unleashing Alaska's Extraordinary Resource Potential. We are the only state in the country that has our own executive order. It was issued on day one of the Trump administration. It's really long. It's really good. I have a little bit of authorship because our office wrote a lot of it. The governor worked with us too, got it to the president's team. The reason I mention this is because if you guys are working on a project, any kind of economic development project in our state, and it has a federal agency nexus, you got to get a copy of this because, as I've told people, whether you think President Trump and his team are great or whether you don't like them at all, it doesn't matter. This executive order is all about moving Alaska out, creating jobs, creating economic opportunity, getting federal agencies to not lock us up like the previous administration, but to unleash us. And so get a copy of this, because if you have any issues with federal agencies, let us know. That's our job. We will help you. We want everybody to succeed and be lifted up in our economy. And that's what I think this bill is going to do. And that's why it's so important. So with that, why don't we start the PowerPoint and go to the first slide. So can you guys see this PowerPoint presentation? Good? Everybody good to go? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so this, this slide in and of itself, I think this would be a home run for us, right? And the reason is you saw the previous administration went to lock up our state through executive orders. So what did we do? The president said, hey, I want this bill to unleash American energy. Okay, it does. But what it really does, and this is part of my theme about us doing so well in this bill is almost exclusively about unleashing Alaska energy, right? Look at this PowerPoint slide. As you guys know, because you've been part of our economy in many important ways, some of the biggest things we've been trying to get done for years, for decades, we got done in this bill. Mandatory lease sales from ANWR for the next 10 years. So that is required by law. If you have a administration 3 years from now says, hey, I want to do what Biden did and shut down Alaska, can't do it. The law says you got to do lease sales in ANWR. You got to do lease sales in the National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska. You got to do lease sales in Cook Inlet for the next 10 years. Very significant, very important. That's baked in the law. It gives our investors in the energy sector certainty. Hey, we can rely on this, Dan, even if we have an election in 3.5 years or 3 years from now, we can rely on lease sales for our great state. This is one of the reasons you're seeing, for the first time ever, the North Slope decline curve in terms of taps is finally starting to do this. Okay, with all this stuff and what's happening with regard to our state lands as well, NPRA, by the way, is probably the hottest oil and gas basin on the planet Earth, which is really exciting for us. Think about the Willow Project and all this other stuff. We're at about 500,000 barrels a day. We are estimated within 3 to 4 years to be back to 750, 800,000 barrels a day. We're reversing the decline curve. We've never done that. It is exciting. Okay, now take a look at the slide. The other reason this is really exciting, all these federal land revenues, when we got revenues from federal lands in terms of oil and gas, it was always at a number that wasn't so great for Alaska, either 50-50 or look at Cook Inlet. Right now, only 27% of the revenues out of Cook Inlet federal lands come to the state. What this bill also did is it says after 2034, the revenue split for federal lands on oil and gas, and think about it, NPRA, ANWR, this could be millions of barrels, is going to go 70-30, 70 for the state, 30 for the feds. We've been trying to get that done really since statehood. So that is another huge win. That's going to help our legislators have a better time in Juneau with bigger budgets and, bigger permanent fund dividends for our citizens. So next slide. So that slide, like I said, is a huge win for our great state. What about this slide? This still goes to resource development. We're going to be streamlining NEPA in this bill, the National Environmental Policy Act. Trust me, that is an issue I care deeply about. Alaska manufacturers do as well. Our permitting system, in my view, is broken. It takes so long to permit a road, a bridge, a port, a mine. And we, unfortunately, have been ground zero for a lot of that regulatory delay and frivolous litigation on our economic development projects. This streamlines the NEPA process. Huge opportunities for timber sales, particularly in Southeast. There's a mandatory requirement of 250 million board feet a year in this bill from federal forests for harvest. Now, You can't do that, in my view, without significant harvest from the Chugach and Tongass National Forests. Okay, a couple others really, really important for our state. A big critical mineral supply chain fund that's already paying dividends in Alaska. That's primarily from the Department of Defense. You may have seen the DoD, well, now the Department of War, is made big investments in a couple big Alaska mines, a $40 million investment, a $43 million investment for critical minerals. And then finally, we got the Ambler Road signed off on by President Trump again. That has great opportunities for minerals, for mining, but also very important for manufacturing, for value added. The second last bullet, though, I'm going to spend some time on. I am so excited about what's going on in the Alaska LNG project. Now, look, I know whenever you talk about our pipeline, gas pipeline and LNG, people roll their eyes. Come on, Dan. We've been talking about this for 40 years, 50 years, which is true. But I've been working on this way before I was a senator. And I will tell you, I've never seen so much momentum, so much stakeholder alignment. And one of the things that this bill does, it creates an energy dominance financing program to help fund at low cost big, giant energy infrastructure projects. I had a lot to do with setting this up with the Secretary of Energy. Guess who's first in line on this energy dominance financing fund? The Alaska LNG project. That project is making huge strides. The President of the United States, you may have seen in his State of the Union earlier this year, said this is one of his administration's top priorities. This executive order that I mentioned, the Trump one on unleashing Alaska's energy, it talks about the AKLNG project as a top priority. The president and his team have been pressing this with every foreign leader in Asia on the need to buy this. I just had a great meeting with one of the world's top investors in energy and data centers who are really interested in this project. The developers, Glen Farm, working closely with the Trump administration and us and the state and the governor, they're talking about a final investment decision in January. Let me say that again. They're talking about a final investment decision on this project in January. Think about what we can do as a state if we have a 50 to 100-year supply of clean burning Alaska natural gas at a decently low cost. You guys are manufacturers. I don't think there's anything we couldn't do. Our strategic location, I met with some very top officials. Matter of fact, I'm going to meet with another one this week from FedEx. They have talked about, look, given the strategic location of Alaska, if you guys get low cost energy for 100-year supply to Alaskans, you could do anything. You could do small scale, medium scale manufacturing because of our strategic location. So I have never been more excited about our economy, jobs. Yeah, we got challenges. There's no doubt. We always have challenges. But boy, oh boy, if we're moving out on this gas line and by the summer, we're starting to buy and purchase and lay pipe for this, I think our future, especially, by the way, in terms of manufacturing, is going to be enormously bright. So that's my big pitch on that. Let me go to a couple other areas that I think you guys really care about. Next slide. This is what a key element of this bill does is it keeps the tax levels where they were after the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. You might remember that bill in 2017, we got that done by lowering taxes on small businesses, on working families, on C corps, on pass-throughs. Pretty much everybody got a tax cut. The challenge, of course, that was a 10-year bill, okay? So those taxes were all ready to go up on everybody, all our businesses, all our families, had we not passed this bill to extend those taxes this year. Those taxes were going to rise at the end of this year back to pre-2017 levels. You look at that bullet, that would have been about a $4.5 to $5 trillion tax hike on all Americans, all Alaskans. You look at that sub bullet, that would have been a huge hit on our small businesses. Fortunately, not only did we not take the hit, we kept those tax levels at the same area, the same level they're at now, and we made them permanent. So you guys can rely on that. But we did more than just keep the taxes at the same level, so there was no huge tax hike. We did a big expansion because we've been hearing from Alaskans on the child tax credit, on child care, and the ability for small businesses and families to have a tax benefit with regard to child care. Look at some of those numbers there on those sub bullets, really important. Next slide. Then, and Megan, you already mentioned it, we did a whole bunch of other things that we think were really important for working families and small businesses. The one with regard to small businesses, this bill allows for full expensing in year one for capital expenditures. Well, that was the number one thing we heard from small businesses. We think this is going to help create an investment boom across the country, certainly, hopefully in our state. But this bill, you may have heard the president talk about no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. That's all there. That's going to be great for working families. There's a lot of focus on affordable housing taxes. These are the low-income housing tax credits, which have been a successful program since the 1980s to build affordable housing, which we need in a big way back in our great state. This makes those low-income housing tax credits permanent and expands those, which we think are really, really important. So a whole host of things in here for working families, small businesses that we think are going to be critical to really jumpstart our economy and create the opportunities for you guys to employ more of our fellow citizens. Next slide. Look, I don't want to get into the sausage making here, but you may have seen there were some ads out there saying, hey, this bill cuts taxes for billionaires and millionaires and it cuts Medicaid. It doesn't do either of those. So that's just a slide that goes into that. Next slide. So let me get into a couple other areas. Now, look, this goes to national security and the critical role Alaska has with regard to our national security in the Arctic and the North Pacific. But this also, these next couple slides also really go to job opportunities, the ability of our small businesses and manufacturers to take advantage of what we're going to be doing in Alaska with regard to the Coast Guard and our military. Some of you may have seen this slide. I show it a lot. It's called Adversaries in America's Arctic. It shows on the back slide, and we'll get these to you, Megan, Lacey, if you haven't seen them yet. This is the list of all the Russian and Chinese incursions via the air with strategic bombers and the Navy with naval task forces into our airspace and into our waters, our ADIZ, as they call it, and our EEZ. Look at these numbers. They're crazy. They're huge. Heck, the Russians did one right before Thanksgiving. Okay, dozens. The green ones, by the way, are joint Russian-Chinese strategic bomber task forces and naval task forces in Alaska's waters. They don't do that anywhere in the world, but they're doing it up in our neighborhood. We are on the front lines of this new era of authoritarian aggression. So what are we doing? Well, look, just look at this slide. I chair the Coast Guard subcommittee in the Senate, so I'm very proud of this slide. We are making the biggest investment in the Coast Guard in American history. That is not some kind of exaggeration. It is a fact. This bill provides $25 billion to build up our Coast Guard, and a lot of that is going to come to the great state of Alaska. Look at these numbers. 16 new icebreakers. Right now, we have 2 icebreakers. One is broken, right? I mean, we need icebreakers. By the way, the Russians have 54, and many of which are nuclear powered and weaponized, okay? Well, there's an icebreaker gap, but we're going to start making it up with this. 22 new cutters, $4.5 billion of shoreside infrastructure, 40 new helicopters. You look at that beautiful looking icebreaker in the bottom of that slide in the right hand. That's the U.S. Coast Guard icebreaker, the Storis, that just got commissioned in Juneau this August. It was a great ceremony. Hopefully some of you were there, a little bit rainy, but it was still really exciting. That great icebreaker with 200 coasties is going to be home ported in Juneau. I was able to get $300 million to make sure we had the infrastructure for Juneau to home port that icebreaker. But look, you see 3 Arctic security cutters. I'm going to try to get 2 or 3 of those. And I think I'm off to a really good start. We just had the confirmation of the new comment on the Coast Guard to get 2 or 3 of those additionally home ported in our great state. Look, the Coast Guard's like the Marine Corps. We have this ethos. They have this ethos. Hey, we can do more with less. We can suck it up. Don't worry. We can, use 50-year-old helicopters. Well, at a certain point, you can't suck it up anymore. You need new stuff. And this is going to be great for the Coast Guard, but great for Alaska because a lot of this is coming to our state. And when we are taking care of the Coast Guard, bringing new coasties to our great state, we're protecting America. We're being able to project power. But I'll tell you what, this is also really, really good for our economy. We will have hundreds of millions, if not billions, in infrastructure from the Coast Guard and, next slide, from the Department of Defense. The other thing this bill did, it did a massive buildup of our military, which we also need. Look again at some of these numbers. The Missile Defense Golden Dome Initiative, I'm leading the effort in the Senate on that. $25 billion for the first phase of that. That's a big initiative of President Trump. But guess who is the cornerstone of America's missile defense? We are. This is going to be a lot more infrastructure for Alaska, a lot more jobs, bunch of other infrastructure provisions in here. One that I'm proud of, $115 million to reopen the Navy base at Adak, Alaska, out in the Aleutian Island chain. That's not going to fully reopen it, but it's a start. That is a really strategic base. We should have never shut it down in the 1990s, and now we're going to be rebuilding that. So this is super exciting. This is happening already. I literally, in my office 20 minutes ago, had a meeting with the top Navy guys saying, let's get on it, guys. We're going to reopen ADAC. Again, that's great for our national security, but Alaskans are going to build that. That's going to be infrastructure. That's going to be jobs. That's going to be really important. This and the Coast Guard funding will solidify our role as a hub of strategic operations for the world, for America, based in our great state. Next slide. Look, this one, a lot of people say, hey, Dan, why does this matter to us? We're 4,000 miles away from the border. The president and this bill, and we are all committed to securing the border. That's just what every country should be able to do. And it's not just the wall and additional law enforcement and border patrol that we need to secure our border. By the way, you're seeing the president is off to a very good start. Illegal immigration since the Trump administration came in is down 99%. So we're securing the border. But here's the thing. This is going to save lives in Alaska. Why? You look at these numbers, the fentanyl overdose rate in our state the last 2 years has been the highest in the country. Let me repeat that. Alaskans are dying at higher rates than any other Americans the last 2 years because of fentanyl overdoses from the southern border. This is poisoning our kids. The numbers are horrendous, and I doubt that there's probably anyone watching this presentation who has not been impacted by a family member, a friend. It's all young Alaskans. The Mexican drug cartels selling this poison are in our Alaska Native villages. We have to secure the border. When people ask me, hey, why do you care, Dan? You guys are 4,000 miles away. This is why I care, right? We got to secure the border in terms of this deadly fentanyl. This is going to help save lives, and it's going to be very important. The next slide also is something that's going to be really important for us, and it's going to save lives. Look at that first bullet. We have the highest crash rates by far and highest death rates of any state in the country when it comes to aviation crashes. You guys know this again. I doubt there's anyone watching on this presentation that's not been negatively impacted by someone being severely injured or dying in a plane crash. A number of years ago, I started with the FAA, what we call the FOSI initiative, the FAA Alaska Aviation Safety Initiative. This bill, this funds air traffic control and aviation overhaul for the whole country. But again, Alaska is going to get a bunch of this money. You see $12.5 billion. I've already had commitments from the president, from the Secretary of Transportation to upgrade our aviation-related infrastructure. You look at those AWOS systems, these are the visual weather reporting observation systems that we have to have at every airport. You may have seen, I was really excited about it in a press conference with the president and the Secretary of Transportation. The president announced that number, 175 new weather stations in terms of AWOS reporting for Alaska. That is a home run. We have already gotten about that slide. This slide is actually out of date. So already about 160 million for aviation infrastructure in our state from this bill. It's going to save lives. Everybody's going to be impacted on that. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to try and go through this one kind of quick, but it matters to all Alaskans. You know, you may have seen these ads on TV. Hey, this bill cuts Medicaid, cuts supposedly Medicare, Social Security. It doesn't do any of that. So let me repeat. Bill doesn't touch Social Security. The bill doesn't touch Medicare. The law does make significant Medicaid reforms, but those reforms are focused on states that use this system called provider taxes and state-directed payments. Kind of a scam over the years where there's been ways in which states have gotten literally hundreds of billions of additional federal dollars for Medicaid to those states. And it's always been viewed as sketchy, these provider tax schemes. Even President Obama tried to stop this kind of abuse of the system. This bill does it. However, there's one state in the country, maybe because we Alaskans are so honest, that never did this scheme, never used provider taxes, never used these things called state-directed payments. That state, us. So the Medicaid reforms in this bill don't impact us because we've been the honest state, not scamming the system. So our Medicaid funding streams, you look there, they're going to continue to be the same. There's no cuts in terms of the funding to Medicaid. So if you see an ad on TV or something on the internet, trust me, I'm sure you've seen a lot of them. They're not true, right? This is the truth. Now, some people might say there is a provision in here that has a requirement for people if they're able-bodied, right? If they don't have dependents, if they're young, they're not disabled, that there is a requirement for 20 hours of work, training, education, or volunteering if you're getting Medicaid. Now, I think it's important to try to lift people up off these programs. Obviously, these programs are designed for disabled people, pregnant women. They're the ones who should be benefiting from it. But if you're not one of those categories and you're an able-bodied, say, young man who's 28, well, this bill says, hey, you can still get Medicaid, but you got to go work or get training or volunteer or help improve yourself, go to school. Now, if that person says, no, I don't want to do any of those things, then they would lose their Medicaid funding. But that's not a cut. That would be a choice. And so if you're hearing about that, we think that the Medicaid work or volunteer requirement, you know, is actually healthy for our society, for encouraging young people to have earned success and work. You might remember the Clinton era welfare reform was 30 hours a week that President Clinton mandated for people getting welfare. This is about 1/3 less in terms of the timeline, 20% or 20 hours a week, but that's not a cut. That's we think, an important provision. Now, next slide. Um, there are a number of uh, exemptions for Alaskans on this work requirement. There's a number of exemptions in regions of Alaska. Let's say the unemployment rate's really high, and even if someone wanted to go work, they didn't have an opportunity. We have a number of carve-outs here. This was a provision in the bill that would have increased Alaska's federal match on Medicaid, something I've been working on for, honest to goodness, about 10 years. I thought it was really important. I got the president's endorsement of it, the Republican Senate's endorsement on it. Unfortunately, in the process, by doing what's called a budget reconciliation bill, you can have different members of the Democrat and Republican Party try to strip things out if they don't like the provision. Unfortunately, Senator Schumer and some of the Democrats on this bill, not being partisan here, just a fact, they stripped out this, what we call the FMAP provision, my bill, to increase Medicaid. So that was a huge disappointment. But you go to the next slide, we were able to pivot. In pivoting, I was able with my team to say, hey, I lost that really good provision for Alaska, increasing our Medicaid. So we had this Rural Health Transformation Fund. You might be reading about it. I was able to significantly plus up that fund, work the formula to make it very favorable to the most rural state, ours, and get that funding started soon. So I think you're going to see a dramatic strengthening of the Alaska healthcare system through this fund that's meant to help rural hospitals, rural states that have big challenges delivering healthcare, particularly given the cost. This is likely, right now the state's applying for this fund. This is likely going to increase federal funding to help us have a stronger rural healthcare system by a couple $100 million a year. Very excited about this. My team and I worked really hard. We got challenges in Alaska on healthcare delivery, no doubt. This is going to be one of the opportunities. But if you're still seeing ads on TV, hey, this bill cuts Medicaid, it's going to undermine Alaska's healthcare system, the opposite is actually the fact. We're going to get more federal funds to strengthen our healthcare system, and it's exciting. Next slide. Same thing with regard to certain provisions on other elements where we did carve-outs protecting Alaska's most vulnerable communities. One thing I'm very proud of, our seniors. You know, senior citizens are the #1 growing population in Alaska, which is great. Our seniors have done so much for our state, for our country. One of the great provisions in here is a tax deduction on Social Security, $6,000 per individual, $12,000 per couple. That's going to put more money in the pockets of our seniors, which we think is really important. Next slide. These are a couple other provisions going to strengthen the healthcare delivery system, particularly the big innovations we made on telehealth that are so important to our state. Let me wrap up with the final couple slides here. This one is really important. You never hear about it. By the way, Josh, you got to work with the team. We got to change this slide number. Unfortunately, I've been giving this presentation since July. That number already in the first bullet is already outdated. The debt to the United States that we owe right now is $37 trillion. I mean, you guys, nobody ever talks about this, but this is not good at all for America, right? Last year, we hit this inflection point that when you look at history, whether it's the Romans or the British or the Dutch or the Spanish, their empires started to decline when they were paying more on the interest on their debt than they did to defend themselves. And last year, we hit that very bad inflection point. We paid more interest just on our debt than we did to fund the Pentagon. Look at that number, $950 billion. That didn't go to a road. That didn't go to an icebreaker. That didn't go to build a new hospital in Alaska. That went to bondholders, many of whom reside in Asia. We got to get our arms around this for the sake of our kids and our grandkids, this bill starts that process. It has one of the biggest reductions in spending over 10 years that any piece of legislation come out of the Congress in the last couple of decades. 1.2 trillion in savings. But look, to me, what I think is going to be the real key, you can't cut your way out of a $37 trillion debt, but you can grow your way out. That's what we did with the first 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We got back to robust GDP growth. I think this is going to get our state and our country back growing strongly again. That's how you bring down this debt to GDP ratio. That's really, really high right now. We got to do that. And I think this bill is not going to, it's just going to make the historic savings in terms of spending cuts, but importantly in terms of growth. So final two slides. Again, this is just a little bit of the sausage making. I mentioned that either party can come and try to strip out the good stuff in the bill. You go fight in front of what's called our parliamentarian here in the Senate, say, no, this is a good bill. It abides by all the rules, the Byrd rule. I'm just mentioning here, Senator Schumer, the Democrat leader, for whatever reason, every single good thing for Alaska in this bill, he came after to try to strip out. Look at all those great provisions. We saved them all, with the exception of that FMAP provision that I mentioned for increased Medicaid funding for Alaska, which was a tough one. But on everything else, we fought back, won, kept these great provisions in there for our state. Final slide is really what I started with. This is a great opportunity. I don't think there's one provision in this very big bill that's a bad one for Alaska or our citizens. To the contrary, there's no state that did better in this bill than we did. Now, what we got to do is work to implement it. The federal government, the state, the governor, the state legislature, and most importantly, in my view, the private sector, you guys. This is going to be a great opportunity for us. And if we have our private sector fully aware, fully focused on what's in it, boy, oh boy, especially guys like you, I think we're going to have a great future. This is what policy that makes job creation better, stronger wages, we hope, is going to happen with this bill. So with that, I want to thank you guys again. Megan, Lacey, congrats again on the Alaska Manufacturing Association. We want to partner with you guys. Hopefully that's a good update. If you have more info that you'd like, those slides in the handouts that I gave you, we'd be happy to provide those. So with that, look forward to any questions or comments or suggestions on what we were able to pass in July, a bill that I think is going to be a home run for our great state. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, Senator. And we will be opening things up for questions from the audience. A couple reminders before we begin. Please keep questions brief and direct. Please remain respectful. We are here to foster a constructive conversation. Keep questions focused on manufacturing, supply chain, business impacts, or opportunities that are connected to this bill. If you have a longer or more specific question, we can connect you directly to the Senator's team after the event. And Lacey, I know that you have a lot of questions in the chat to go through, so she's going to take those on to start.
Okay, and hey, Lacey, I hate to do this. I kind of went a little long. We are in the middle of a vote right now here
Okay, no
on
worries.
the Senate floor. So I already got a call from the cloakroom once saying, hey, get down here and vote. I can't miss a vote. You guys wouldn't like that if I did that. So why don't we try and take two quick questions, and then Margaret can, on my team, we want to answer all the questions. So I apologize. I always go a little bit long in this presentation just because, well, I think there's a lot of good stuff in this. So, but let's hit the two real quick, and then we can follow up. And I want to thank you guys again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, Senator. You've consistently backed Alaska job creators. What specific SBA actions can we align behind to expand access to working capital and equipment financing for manufacturers, including the 7A and the 504 utilization, lender participation, and any Alaska-specific adjustments that reduce friction and shorten decision timelines?
Well, look, it's a great question, and it's such an important question. To me, what I've been trying to do, and again, having Margaret on my team on the on the call. We want to have federal agencies that want to partner with us, not stop us, right? That's again why I can't emphasize this enough. If you have any federal agency that's giving you guys grief, show them this day one executive order from the Trump administration, and then call us and say, hey, Senator, you know, the freaking Corps of Engineers, the EPA, they're dragging their feet. We will get on it. We will work with you, because these federal agencies, and you mentioned the SBA, they should be partners in helping us, not trying to shut us down. So this bill, like I said, it lowers taxes. I think one of the big excitement elements of this is the full year expensing on, you know, big capital projects. If you guys are doing a big investment in some kind of infrastructure, some kind of capital investment, the depreciation and expensing you can do in year one. That is giant to help our small businesses get the profitability and make strategic investments. The SBA is usually very helpful. Again, if they're not being helpful, let us know. Sometimes even the SBA can be very bureaucratic. And at the big level, as I mentioned, this new strategic mining financing program, we've had already close to $100 million from the federal government, the Department of Defense, saying we are going to invest in these mines in Alaska because they have critical minerals that we need to bring to our economy, to our national defense industrial base that right now we're reliant on China on. And then secondly is that big energy dominance financing facility. We were able to seed that with over $1 billion. I worked directly with the Secretary of Energy. That is a seeding of $1 billion, but they can do loans way, way more exceeding that. If you look at the federal loan guarantees that Senator Murkowski and I got in the infrastructure bill for our gas line, we're the only energy project in the country that's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. And this energy dominance financing program that Glenn Farm right now is working with the Treasury or Energy Department on. I think we're going to get federal help on the gas line that, like I said, I think that can get over the goal line. If we get that over the goal line, we're producing Alaska energy. Not only that, but building an 800-mile pipeline. Every manufacturer in our state is going to have a great opportunity. So it's pretty exciting right now. And, you know, we want all your guys' ideas and support. We want to be supportive here, but I am
You gotta go.
I'm getting the hook.
We gotta go. Thank you for being
Right.
with us. We're gonna all stay on the call so we can compile everything, but thank you, Senator Sullivan. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, and thanks again. Good luck, you guys. We're here with you. And Margaret, if you can stay on and just make sure we get all the questions, and we will have them to answer for sure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again, everybody. Keep up the great work.
Awesome.
Great. Look at that. Thank you, Lacey. Good job. If anybody has any additional questions to put into the chat, we will compile all of those and send them to Senator Dan Sullivan's team. Margaret, I appreciate you helping us out with getting this all together to share with our manufacturing community and have the senator come and speak on this bill that's coming out or that has come out.
Of course.
Should I just do those closing slides, Lace?
Yeah, I was not on audio, but yes, please pull those slides up.
Yes.
Ooh, let me take your spotlight off.
Oh yeah, because I have myself all big on the side. So thank you all for being here today and staying engaged in the conversation that can shape the future of manufacturing in Alaska. Events like this work because our community shows up. Your insight, your questions, and your participation directly influence how we advocate at the state and the federal level. And before we close, I want to highlight a few important steps. If you're not yet a member of AKMA, I'd love to invite you to join us. Becoming a member is one of the strongest ways to support the work that we're doing, whether it's policy advocacy, events like this roundtable, workshops, or building stronger networks across Alaska's manufacturing ecosystem. Also, make sure that you sign up for our email list if you haven't already. That's the best place to stay informed as we schedule more mixers, factory tours, workshops, and policy briefings. We want you connected, supported, and in the loop on everything happening across the state. We'll also share follow-up notes and resources from today's event, including links, summaries, and everything that the Senator's team has provided. And if you do have any other questions, please feel free to email us those if you did not have a chance to get those in the chat. I want to offer a special thank you to Senator Sullivan and his team for making today possible, and for all of you, our manufacturers, our partners, and community members for continuing to build Alaska's manufacturing future. Thank you again for being here.